Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to Spider Sense Riding. My name is DJ, one of the three-wheel Can-Am specialists here at MotoMember Select, one of the largest Can-Am dealers here in the U.S. And today, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Can-Am Ryker, this little bad boy right here. This is a 900 Rally. They do make a 600, they make a 900 Sport, and they also make a base 900. But what I really want to touch base on about the Ryker is, when is a rider considering making the transition from the Ryker to the Spyder? Something goes off in their head where it just makes sense to make an upgrade or transition to a much bigger frame, much bigger motor, a little bit more technology, and a little bit more comfort as well. But before we dive into that, we'll just talk a little bit about the Ryker and who it's really for, what it's meant to do out there for that rider. But they do make a Ryker in a 600 and a 900. So when I say 600, just the size of the motor. As far as 600 and a 900, they are CVT transmissions, so they are fully automatic. On the left side of the body panel, there is a lever where if you push it forward and you hit the throttle, you will move forward. If you pull that lever backwards, you will go into reverse. It's that simple. It's super beginner friendly. So those that are looking to just jump straight into the three-wheel world and they've never done it before, this is usually the model that they try to gravitate towards. Fantastic fun. And I'm not here to bash anything about the Ryker. This is an awesome machine. I personally had some of the most fun out there on the road on a Ryker. But since I work at one of the largest dealers here in the nation, I get to pick and choose exactly which models I get to ride and get some real world experience. But the Ryker here, it's meant for simplicity. There's not a whole lot that goes on with it. You twist the throttle and you go, have a blast. They have a little punchy, a little bit torquiness in the motor itself, and it's great for like weekend riders, quick trips, around the area, inner cities and stuff like that, depending on the model. Like this Ryker is called a Ryker Rally, so it's sort of their dual sport. So you can have a little bit of fun in some sand, some gravel, spin that back tire. So depending on the terrain, the Rykers can really get after it depending on that model. But if you're just taking the course for the first time, and myself included, this is the model that I actually got my three-wheel license on. If you got to take it on a Spyder, kudos to you. You got a little bit spoiled, but 9 times out of 10, you're most likely going to take it on a Ryker. Again, very beginner friendly, very simplistic, not a whole lot to think about. It allows that person to kind of jump in the waters and see what the three-wheel world is really about. So what I was mentioning is what makes it make sense for them to transition to a Spyder. So to dive into it, the Ryker is meant for quick, short fun. And it's something that helps somebody learn whether they're going to like riding three wheels or this is just something that they want to get into. And then once they do, they start realizing some of the features that a Ryker does not have for, let's say, long distance, let's say storage. And then just us as human beings, we crave more. So it's usually technology and stuff like that. We always upgrade our phones, our TVs, our cars for a little bit more after we got used to something, which is nothing wrong. It's just human nature. So let's say we're hopping on this Ryker here, and we get really comfortable. We're having a lot of fun over it in the past couple of months, and then we join some of our groups, or we have some buddies or family members that like to take long distance travels. They like to go on highways and stuff like that. And now you see yourself on the highway with them, catching up. And then you look at the gas fuel or the fuel gauge and you realize you got to stop for gas while your Spyder guys are just waiting for you to fill up. Or those two-wheel bikers that have those big baggers, they got huge gas tanks. So they're just waiting for you to fill up. So that's just one thing that kind of goes off in your head is, I keep stopping for gas a little bit more often. And let's say you get your gas, you're still traveling down the road. You guys are going, let's say 3, 4 hours, 5 hours, away. And you need means of carrying your gear or your stuff. Unfortunately, the Ryker, it is very limited to exactly what comes right out the get-go or out the box when it comes to storage capacity. You have a small storage bin. It's probably going to be a little bit smaller than, let's say, a glove box of a car. I'll put it around 1.5 to maybe 2 gallons of storage capacity. So just big enough to carry maybe your phone, a small device like an iPad or a Kindle. You can maybe stuff a very, very light rain jacket. I won't say pants or anything like that, maybe just a jacket, books, things of that nature, very small capabilities of carrying your stuff, unless you upgrade to, let's say, shad bags or link Q top cases where you can start adding a little bit more. So that's just another thing that pops in your head on top of the fuel gauge, not being able to carry a lot of your stuff with you. You might have to carry a backpack. That might be a little bit annoying sometimes for some others. But another simple thing is, there is no spot that you can put your helmet on this bike. That's a huge thing. You know, some people like to go into the bar, go to the club, go to a friend's buddy's house, whatever it is, you know, wherever you're going, where you're not staying overnight, you maybe just be popping in, but you don't want to be walking around carrying your helmet. So something to consider, and it's something small, but it's a fact that unfortunately there's nowhere that you can actually put your helmet and it's secure, and nobody's going to walk up to it and take it unless there's some way that you jerry-rigged, you know, a locking system on there. The next thing is going to be a little bit of the technology. So again, I mean, as you're traveling down the road with your buddies, and you're looking at your dash display, which is just going to tell you your miles per hour, Fahrenheit of the engine, the time, your RPMs, and that's pretty much it. So there's not going to be too many drive modes or ride enhancements like sport modes. Depending on the model of the Ryker, there are sport modes, there are rally modes, but let's say eco modes and stuff like that. You're not going to get a whole lot of technology or rider enhancements when it comes to a Ryker. Again, they're supposed to be simplistic. They're just supposed to be twist the throttle and go, not a whole lot to think about. And then the very last thing, in my opinion, is going to be two-up comfort. So when I say two-up, I mean riding with a passenger. As you guys can see, it is built just for the single seater or the single rider for right now. You can add passenger seats, but when it comes to comfort for them back there, I can't say it's the best. They're going to be the most comfortable. Maybe for, you know, some of us ride with our children or spouses that are a little bit on the smaller side. You know, that might be still a cramped space for that person that's going to be sitting back there, but there's not a whole lot of passenger comfort that comes with any of the Rykers out there. The last thing I will mention just before I hop into considering more of the Spyders is going to be small technology like the heated grips or a heated seat. So you can upgrade your Ryker to get heated grips, but that's the only thing that you can find that's going to be heated. There is no heated seat. There's nothing that's available for the passenger to help them keep warm. So small things like that adds up over time. So again, somewhere in our mind, it starts making sense for us to kind of make a transition to look at a Spyder. So now we can go long distance. We have means of carrying our gear because every single F3 or RT is going to have a front trunk compartment big enough to carry a helmet. And then if you upgrade to the F3 Limited or the F3T or the RT Limiteds, you'll have side bag storage as well. So a lot more means of carrying a lot of the gear. Even if you don't expect to go somewhere, but you see something, you know, that you want to purchase, you know, you can go ahead and purchase it because you know you have the means of carrying that stuff. Or even going to the grocery store. Just makes it a little bit more comfortable. And then at highway speeds, again, this is a 600 or a 900 that I'm talking about on the Ryker. So at highway speeds, it's not necessarily meant to be sustainable at long periods of time on the highway. Again, it's snappy, it's torquey. So maintaining a certain speed over a long period of time, not necessarily is going to say it's bad for the Ryker. It's just you're going to notice that, you know, I don't really have much throttle to give if I really want to get out of somebody's way or if I want to get out of my own way. The 900s are definitely a lot more susceptible to that as opposed to the 600 model, which is why a lot might, you know, upgrade from a 600 to the 900. But at highway speeds, it's not ideal when it comes down to it. Short, spirited rides is really what the Ryker is all about. And then, of course, you know, jumping into more of the comfort creature features for the Spyder. I mean, you have a large saddle for both the driver and the passenger, a lot more real estate to sit on. You can stretch your legs out a little bit farther. Your passenger back there, depending on which Spyder or whether it's an F3 or an RT. If it's a limited, you'll have the top case, so they have an integrated backrest back there. You have an extra top case to carry more of your stuff. You have a little bit more ride enhancements in there that are going to help with stability controls, a much larger frame. So at highway speeds, you have a lot of crosswinds, a lot of freight trucks and stuff like that that go by that like to blow a little bit of wind and kind of shake you around a little bit. And it's obvious because the Ryker has a much smaller frame. So when a lot of wind comes into play, you know, you might feel a little bit of that rocking going on. Whereas your Spyder, it's pretty much double the size or weight, and that frame is a lot heavier. So it's going to be a lot more acceptable when it comes to, you know, wind drafts and stuff like that. Wind buffering, you have a lot more body panels to kind of cover up and help protect you from the wind. Because as you can see, there's not much wind protection on this bike at all, other than the helmet that you're going to potentially be wearing. And of course, it has to be a full face, so you're wearing some goggles. You can get a windscreen, but it's a very small windscreen. It's meant to be open road feel, so you're supposed to get that wind in your face on a Ryker. So they don't really have huge options when it comes to the windshields unless you're looking at aftermarket. But again, if you're jumping to an F3 or an RT, you have a decently sized windscreen that's going to protect both the driver and the passenger back there. And a huge thing that I did slightly skip over is going to be the power steering. A lot of people don't really think about power steering because they're riding, they're enjoying it. But over time, when you're going on a lot of twisties or just in general, you might get that little bit of a shoulder workout because you're sort of muscling into those turns. And of course, when you're at speeds and using the momentum of you riding, you're not going to be noticing how much you're really kind of forcing the bike to turn. But there is no power steering on a Ryker. That is something that you're going to get right from the get-go on any of the Spyders that you so choose. And it's very easy to push and pull with one hand if you really wanted to. Of course, you should have two hands on the handlebar, but it's not difficult to utilize the handlebars or the steering on a Spyder just because of that power steering. So something very small can make a huge difference when you're riding short distance or even long distance. But it's small things like this that add up over time of us riding a Ryker that makes it click somewhere in our brain that, okay, I think it does make sense for me to transition to a Ryker, because it has nothing to do with the bike. It really just has to do with your new lifestyle. Because again, once you get the Ryker for the very first time, your lifestyle might be, listen, let me just get into it for the first time. I've never done this before. This is a good place to start, which is perfectly fine. Or I only go on weekend trips. I only ride maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, and I don't really go that far. So we could be sticking with the Ryker. There's nothing wrong with that. But as our lifestyle changes on going more long distance, having more fun on those rides, riding with a passenger more often, that's when it starts clicking that maybe it does make sense to kind of start looking at the Spyders, or maybe just doing a little bit more research on the Spyders. Of course, we do like to make sure we get you familiar with both models when it comes to the Rykers and the Spyders, which is why I always tell people come to the dealership if you are in the market, or just at least researching, because there's no better research to do than actually physically seeing the bikes, touching them, smelling them, seeing them, getting a chance to ride them and understand how they'll feel for you in the real world. Because I get phone calls all the time that, I'm looking at a Ryker. I just took my 3-wheel course. I did it on a Ryker. That's the bike I want. Okay, cool. Is this your first bike that you're going to be getting into? If they tell me yes, then awesome. Come on in. Let's talk about it a little bit. If you see yourself transitioning down the road, or, matter of fact, tell me what kind of rides you plan on doing. My husband or my wife is part of a group, or they like to go cross country on their, big touring style bikes. Okay, well, let's, come into the dealership. Let's talk about the Ryker, but I also want to kind of introduce you to maybe the F3S, something that's very similar in size and frame. Maybe not too similar, but as far as setup wise on the F3S, it's the sportier version or the entry level Spyder. So usually I would try to not push, but kind of guide them to why the F3S might be something that might be a little bit more acceptable for the lifestyle that you're sort of choosing down the road, if you can already see it ahead of time. But guys, that is just going to be a quick video on why, if a Ryker is for you, it is for you. But if you plan on making any changes in your life as far as riding long distance, carrying a passenger, having the means to carry more of your storage or some of your gear, let's talk about it. We can definitely come to an agreement on, for what you're looking to do. Maybe this model might be right for you. Or if you plan on doing this style of riding, maybe we should be looking at this model. But I'm just here to give you the options or the recommendations so you can make a well-informed decision. But hopefully this video was helpful. If you started off on a Ryker and transitioned to a Spyder, let me know what Spyder that you jumped to. If you are a diehard Ryker all day, every day, let me know which Ryker model that you picked. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.